Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 underrated episodes of Star Trek. In this video, I will count down episodes of Star Trek that I feel are great and are not recognized, that most people either think are not so good or just okay. And I think these episodes are amazing and some of the best of the show, and therefore should get more recognition than they deserve. So these are my picks for underrated episodes. Now, of course, this is all just my opinion. This is my companion video for my top 10 most overrated episodes, which I did last month. That was just begging for disagreement, for people to think I was crazy to think those episodes weren't as good as everyone else does. But this is the reverse. This is, and I don't think people will be as upset over this. If anything, they would just be like, nah, those episodes aren't that good. But I think they are. I think these episodes are very good and deserve way more recognition than they generally get. Now, I'm not basing my definition underrated of any one thing in particular. I do use IMDb ratings for some things, but it's not like the end all be all. I do go off of some scuttlebutt that I've seen online, like comments I've received on my channel, or just general reviews that I've watched on other channels and stuff like that, and responses that I've just seen everywhere online that make me think, well, people don't like this episode, or at least not as much as they should. Now, this is different than, I will be doing another top 10 later that has episodes that everyone hates that I think are fine. So I'm not including episodes like that, particularly Alternative Factor, which falls more under that category than underrated, because it's not just underrated, it's like people despise and hate that great episode. So that is for another time, for a different countdown, when I talk about episodes that everyone hates that I think are fine. But here it is not necessarily that people hate these episodes, they just, or some people do, but it's mainly that they just don't think they're as great as I do. Like, I think these episodes are really great. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. And I had so many episodes for this one, so I will start with some honorable mentions that did not quite make my top 10. And first I'll start with A Quality of Mercy from Strange New Worlds, which is very, 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 very clearly the best episode of the show. That episode is amazing. It's an instant classic. I think it's instantly in my top 20 of all Star Trek from the entire franchise. Yet people are saying Memento Mori is better, and it's not. And they're saying that this one was just okay, or that it was too much nostalgia. No, it was like so unique. It was like the perfect what if scenario where we get to relive the events of Balance of Terror, but through this alternate reality where Pike was captain. It's fucking amazing. It's like, it does remind me a lot of like Yesterday's Enterprise or The Inner Light or some of these other great episodes. So totally underrated. Next honorable mention is the Cloud Miners from season 3 of the original series, which I think season 3 gets a lot of hate. Some of it deserved, some of it not, in my opinion. I think maybe it gets a little more hate than it quite deserves, although some of it is quite justified. But definitely not in terms of Cloud Miners. Now, again, I've never seen people single this episode out as being particularly terrible, but it never gets enough recognition as I think it deserves. People never go to it as one of the best episodes of the original series, and I think it is. Because it had excellent social commentary that survives and holds up even to this day. And it was pretty interesting story to boot. So, next on my list of underrated episodes is Timescape, which I know some people might dispute this because it is quite highly rated on IMDb. But again, I'm not just going off of IMDb because I haven't seen that many people like put this in their top 10s or top 20s, and I have seen a lot of people when I mention this episode are like, it's alright. Which, no, it's not just alright. It's amazing. It is one of the best episodes of The Next Generation, in my opinion, where the time freezes. This is one of the most creepy, suspenseful stories, and I think it's better than Cause and Effect, which I had in my overrated list, and which is why, and I think it's underrated. Actually, no, I left Cause and Effect out of my overrated list. I originally had it out, but I think it got pushed out. But anyway. Next, we will get into my final honorable mention, which is Whom Gods Destroy, because I am not an insect, I am a Lord Garth. Now, granted, this episode comes with a very hefty helping of cheese. Sure, but what fun original series episode doesn't, I ask you? And honestly, I think that Garth is a better villain than Khan. I said it, and I will continue to say it, and I've said it before, and I will always say it because it's true. Khan's overrated. Garth is underrated. Love Lord Garth. Anyway, so now let me get into my top 10 most underrated episodes of the Star Trek franchise. So we'll start with my number 10, Prey. This is from Voyager's 4th season. Again, I haven't seen anyone particularly say this episode sucks or anything, but I haven't seen anyone say it's great, or not very many people. Most people are like, oh yeah, it was a pretty good episode. No. This was a masterpiece. Like, this was a really good character story for Seven of Nine, and it was the best use of the Hirogen, this hunter species that really outmatched Voyager that they came across in the 4th season, which is a very interesting concept, but it was only used well in this episode, where they're hunting species 8472, who was this impossible to defeat master alien, even more powerful than the Borg, which was completely destroyed in the next time they appeared in season 5. But we'll talk about that here. And we find out that the member of Species 8472 is just trying to get home. It's not trying to hurt anyone. It's not trying to fuck up anything. It's not trying to conquer the galaxy. He just wants to go home. But these fucking hunter guys are just hunting it for fun, for sport, and Janeway cannot abide that. However, Seven of Nine sees the practicality in the situation that if they do not surrender this species 8472 creature to the Hirogen, Voyager's going to be destroyed. And Janeway blatantly ignores that fact. It's like, we'll figure this way out. And she's wrong, though. I think 709 is correct. The Voyager would have been destroyed. So 709 saves Voyager by defying Janeway's order and getting like the interaction between 709 and Janeway and how they're arguing over the situation. It's amazing. Just amazing dialogue. So yeah, this episode definitely does not get as much love as it deserves. So next on my list is my number 9, Damage from Enterprise. Now, most people do think really highly of this episode. There's a lot of love to be had for this episode, but not enough, in my humble opinion, because for me this is very clearly the best episode of Enterprise. And I've seen reviews lately where people are whining, complaining about, the side plot with T'Pol taking the drugs is dumb and doesn't make any sense. It's fine. And who the fuck cares about that side plot when the main plot is so good? And to be fair, to be clear, I don't really have that big of an issue with the side plot with her taking drugs. Like, I think it tracks. I don't think it's the best plot ever, but it does not interfere at all in the slightest with how amazing the rest of the episode is. The rest of the episode is like a combination of In the Pale Moonlight and Year of Hell, where and unlike something like Year of Hell and Yesterday's Enterprise, like this damage doesn't just magically go away from time travel or whatnot. It's there for the rest of the season, and that's what makes it so good. And to see the crew like so disheveled and distraught to the point where they have to like steal and thieve and act like pirates to these other aliens that are just trying to help them and just want to travel and be on their merry way. This is a role reversal that's fucking amazing. This is the good stuff, because Star Trek always does this where they meet aliens who are desperate and they thieve from our good guys because they have no choice. But this time, it's our fucking good guys who are doing it. That's amazing. And then the acting, the end of the scene, the Ready Room scene with fucking Archer and T'Pol, where T'Pol is like, I won't let you do it. It's some of the best fucking acting in this entire show. So this is clearly the best episode of Enterprise, and not like all the way down in number 20 or whatever bullshit IMDb has it. Number 1, taken away team. That's what this episode is. Anyway, next we will get into my number 8. The Offspring from Next Generation. Now, again, this is a highly regarded episode of Next Generation, but not highly enough, in my humble. It should be in the top 5, and I've never seen it in the top 5 of anything. Even the top 10 is extremely rare, and I've heard the argument that Yesterday's Enterprise was far, far superior to this episode. I think it's better than Yesterday's Enterprise. Honestly, just slightly, though. They're both amazing episodes. But I think also Measure of the Man gets all the spotlight. Everyone always talks about how amazing Measure of the Man is. I think this episode does what a Measure of the Man did, but better, without the cheese of Maddox acting like a mustache-twirly villain, or Riker being forced to be the prosecutor when that makes no fucking sense. It doesn't have that. Instead, it's replaced with the love of the daughter, where Data can express emotions, yet you can the nuance and the very subtle way that they show how much he loves his daughter and how much she loves him. And that scene where she dies brings me to fucking tears. That's one of the most powerful scenes. It's about like an android dying. And we only met an android in one episode. And plus it has that amazing Picard speech where he stands up to the fucking admiral. This is a masterpiece. A masterpiece. It's better than fucking Measure of the Man. It deserves way more recognition than it gets. Anyway, we will then move over to my number 7, Nemesis. Because there's my cat messing around with my thing. Because not the movie, but the Voyager episode of Nemesis. Because we go to the glory way after. Because glimpse the Nemesis. Because my friends were all nullified. Alright, I'll stop with that. See, that funny language is why people really don't get on board with this episode, but I don't mind. I don't care. Like, the actual episode itself tells an amazingly powerful story about the power of propaganda, and does it in a really interesting, really great, really fascinating way, where who you think are the victims and the innocent, and who you think are the monsters. It's actually more complex, and Chakotay was just subjected to propaganda. He's just being brainwashed, and it's a commentary on how all modern day and even historical conflicts are similar, where everyone's brought and bred up to think these people are evil, they're the enemy, they're the monsters, but really that's just propaganda, and the actual situation's a lot more gray and complex than that, and it does it in such an amazing fucking way. So I don't give a fuck how they talk. They can say glory way after glimpses or whatever. I don't care. It's an amazing story. Amazing. And people really get caught up in that language shit to not realize just how fucking powerful this episode is. Anyway, let me move over to my number 6, sticking with Voyager, and that's the second season episode, Deadlock. With this episode where Voyager's duplicated and Janeway kind of has to bargain with a different version of herself, and it is amazing. It is. I think I had it as my number 2 second favorite episode of Voyager. I haven't seen anyone have it anywhere near as high, and I think that's a crime. That's a shame, because this episode's a masterpiece, really. Where it's very fascinating, where they have to cope with having duplicates of themselves and trying to figure out who lives, who dies, and then when they think that one ship is damaged beyond repair, so they're gonna sacrifice it for the other one, the fucking Vadines come and start like harvesting everyone, and those were like amazing scenes that like really got my heart pumping, seeing the Vadines just going around slaughtering people, characters we know like Tom Paris and Tuvok, and then when they get to the bridge, Janeway's like, "Welcome to the bridge," and just blows up the fucking ship in their face. That's amazing shit. That's amazing. This episode's a masterpiece. Now again, some people get hung up on the fact that the science is dumb and doesn't make any sense. Who cares? I don't care. I guess some people care, but I certainly fucking don't. This episode's so good. Anyway, let's get into the next underrated episode, my number 5, and that is A Taste of Armageddon from the original series. I know I've seen a few people show appreciation for this, but it's not that highly rated on IMDb, and even though I've seen a few people appreciate this episode, most people don't. Most top 10s I don't see this on. Most people focus on bullshit like Trouble with Triples or Piece of the Action, which aren't really that good. Instead of this, which is a very powerful episode, where Kirk encounters a world that is, determined to be at war with this other planet, even though it's killing their people. And they found this way they think is brilliant, where they just calculate the deaths on a computer rather than actually use actual weapons. And so when a hit is targeted, the people just walk into an incineration chamber and kill themselves in order to maintain the war. And Kirk rightly points out that this is just even though they think they're getting away with not destroying their city, this is just a comfortable way to prolong war. And this has a lot of modern day commentary, which actually is more relevant today than it was when this episode came out, about how technology makes war more comfortable, more easy. Drone strikes. and people ignore that war should be avoided at all costs. War is horrible, and they become complacent because technology makes it easy. And that's a powerful message in this episode. And it got Scotty being a badass, standing up to the dumb bureaucrat and shit, and Kirk being a badass and standing up to the stupid, leader of this planet. Like, good stuff. This is an amazing episode. It deserves way more recognition than it gets. Anyway, we will move over to my number 4, Whispers from Deep Space Nine. Now, this is always been one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine, where, big spoilers because there's a big twist at the end of the episode, where we're following O'Brien. Everyone around him's acting very weird and strange, and he's like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? And he runs away, and then we find out that's not actually O'Brien. It's actually a clone of O'Brien made by these aliens to assassinate someone, but he thought the clone was made so well he actually thought he was O'Brien. That is such a powerful ending. To be fair, some people think this episode is boring. I don't think it's boring. I think it's suspenseful. I think it's really it's a slow build, but it really earns its ending by building that suspense, by making you wonder what's going on, by getting you in the mindset of this version of O'Brien, really luring you into this false sense that he is O'Brien because he's acting like him so much. And you wouldn't get that if you sped through the plot. So no, this episode's not boring. It's not unnecessarily slow. It's necessarily slow. It is powerful. And the twist ending is freaking amazing. And how we see the O'Brien clone dies and tells the real O'Brien, tell my wife I love her. Like, what? It's just perfect. perfectly Deep Space Nine. To me, this is like, if any episode, someone once asked me and I didn't have the right answer, but anyone asked me, like, what is the quintessential Deep Space Nine episode? Not the best episode of Deep Space Nine, but the episode that encapsulates everything Deep Space Nine stands for. I think it's this episode. Anyway, and some people actually, I have seen some hate for this episode, by the way. I've seen some reviews that trashed it, and some people that really don't like it. But to be fair, overall sentiment on this episode is kind of somewhere in the middle, which is bullshit. It should be at the top. Anyway, let me get into my number 3 most underrated episode of Star Trek, and that is Preemptive Strike from Next Generation. This is the penultimate episode of Next Generation that features Ensign Ro, or Lieutenant Ro, as she's been promoted by the time of this episode, going on a undercover mission for to infiltrate the Maquis, and she starts to have second doubts. Now, this episode mostly follows her, even though we hadn't seen this character in a couple of years. I think that throws some people off. I also think that if you watch this episode by watching like all of Next Generation in order and then watching Deep Space Nine in order, then you're kind of losing something, because you kind of have to watch it as it aired, because this was airing intermixed with season 2 of Deep Space Nine. I think it makes more sense, and so you gotta think of it as an extension of. Some people even say it feels more like a Deep Space Nine episode, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. I fucking love Deep Space Nine, but but it is a Next Generation episode. But you gotta think of it in terms of the larger context between not just Next Gen, but intermixed with season 2 of Deep Space Nine. It makes much more sense. But overall, I think this is easily the best Maquis episode. I think this is the best episode that ever featured on Maquis. This is the one that really gets you to empathize with the Maquis. It gets you in the mindset. You see what their everyday normal lives are like. You see like how they're like great people, and these Cardassians just show up and kill them. And so it makes you totally understand why Ro would pick up that phaser and turn on her allegiance and everything she loves, because she wants to fight the good fight. She's doing what she feels is the right thing, and yet by doing so she betrays her mentor, Picard, and you see the look of devastation on his face when she betrays her. It's just powerful stuff. I think this is one of the best episodes of all of Next Generation. It is in my top 10 easily, and most people think this episode's fine. It's not fine. It's way more than fine. Anyway, we will then get to my number 2 most underrated episode of Star Trek, and that is The Survivors from Next Generation. This is a season 3 episode where I feel like, I know there's another YouTuber out there, Wes from Penske File, who agrees with me on this one. He also really loves this episode, but I think he's the only one I've seen other than me that loves this episode. Like, most sentiment I've seen on this episode is like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. And yeah, most channels, IMDb, all that is not rated that highly. I think this episode is amazing. It's one of my favorites of Next Gen. I think it's the best that really... It's the best, like, mystery episode, I think, that has this really intriguing mystery of, like, this entire colony was destroyed and wiped out by these aliens, yet only 2 old people survive, and their patch of land is perfectly fine. The rest of the entire planet is completely obliterated. And that's a really good mystery. And I love how Picard begins to unravel the mystery, because he keys in on like small details. And even though he doesn't have everything figured out, like he starts to get the picture like ahead of everyone else, and he makes orders or records like, what is he doing? What's going on? But Picard's like 3 steps. He's playing this like 3-dimensional chess, and he eventually figures it out. And that's why I think I called this episode before the best Picard is the man episode. And then you get the other side plot of Troy being like manipulated by this music, and I think some people don't comprehend just how horrific this would be, and they'd be like, oh, that's stupid, she just hears music and goes crazy, that's dumb. You got to think about this. And I put, it's not like you got a song stuck in your head that you can't get out of your head. And Picard even makes that stupid analogy in this episode, and Troy's like, no, you don't understand, dickhead. This is different from that. And it is, because it plays from perfect clarity. Perfect clarity. It's not just, oh, I'm hearing this song. No, it's like you're listening to it on the radio through headphones, or or streaming or whatever. You're listening to it in perfect clarity from start to finish, over and over and over and over again, non-stop for the rest of your life with no stops. To me, this is the most scary horror. That's the most horrific scenario I can possibly think of. Having that stuck, I would fucking go insane too. And even when she goes to sleep, it doesn't stop. Even when you go to sleep, non-stop, 24 hours a day, non-stop, perfect clarity over and over again. That's fucking scary. And so I think this episode treats that scenario correctly. And also, I love how they use Troy's empathic abilities. They acknowledge it. They acknowledge that, hey, she could figure out, because a lot of times she doesn't figure shit out she should have because of plot. But here they actually come up with a reason for why she doesn't figure it out. And it makes sense that this alien, omniscient alien dude who doesn't want to be figured out is like, well, I gotta do something about her or she's gonna figure me out. So she does this horrific thing to her, and then that's why Picard's so determined to stop. And eventually, when confronted with the truth, he's like, "You're right. I shouldn't have done that." And he takes the music from her. And of course, the big reveal is that they did wipe out the entire colony, but he's like this omniscient alien who can't die, and he just recreated his wife, and he wiped out an entire species that attacked it, and just he was overwhelmed with this guilt of having killed every women, children, everyone, everywhere, which is pretty. It's intense stuff. I think it was a very satisfying resolution to this mystery, very intense mystery. So it's a masterpiece, not an okay episode, a masterpiece. All right, so now we will get into my number one most underrated episode of Star Trek, and that is The Quickening from Deep Space Nine's fourth season. Talk about a masterpiece. And this has always been in my top 5 Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine has some amazing, outstanding, just masterpieces. And so for this episode to make my top 5, that really, really tells you how highly I think of it. And most people was like, yeah, this episode's fine, and it's pretty decent, it's good. No, it's not. It's a masterpiece. This episode brings me to tears every time. I think this is one of the most effective character stories in all of Star Trek, where it's a really good start to finish, where Bashir comes in all arrogant and sees this disease as I'm going to use my smarts and brains, and I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to solve it. Just come back and pick me up in a week because I'll have this thing nipped in the bud. And totally underestimates just how complex this is, and just how it was designed by a species way more advanced than the Federation, purposely not to be able to be cured, and how he constantly hits his walls, head in the wall, and he has to come to terms with that throughout the course of this episode, and how he sees the suffering and dying even when he's trying to help his instruments actually cause more pain than he wanted, and god damn, that was just some harrowing stuff. But then the close relationship he forms with one of the women who live on the planet who has the disease, and how she becomes his nurse, and they form this bond, was done so well. And then eventually, she's pregnant, and eventually she dies, but he was able to deliver her. I'm almost coming to tears just talking about this episode. He's able to deliver her baby right before she dies, and because his this medicine he was giving everyone didn't work on adults, but it worked on the fetus, and so the baby is born free of the cure and cured. And I'm gonna cry. Where he shows her her baby, her newborn baby, and says that it's this miracle has happened, that he was able, that it's free of the disease, and then she dies. Like, that is one of the most powerful scenes I've seen in all in fiction. I think it is easily one of the most powerful in Star Trek. And then he had the other doctor who I actually kind of agree with. You can see his point of view where he helps people die peacefully and gives them a good death and gives them the luxuries right before their death and has their family and makes it a ritual. He's well-meaning, but he's butting heads with Bashir because Bashir doesn't understand his cynical mindset, because he's used to living in luxury. He hasn't lived on a planet that's been ravaged by disease, and by the end of it I think Bashir comes to appreciate him more, and he comes to appreciate Bashir more, because at first he thinks that Bashir is a charlatan just offering miracle cures when really nothing can be done, and how they sort of grown to appreciate each other to the point where once Bashir does find this vaccine for the babies, he's like, what he says, again, I'm almost going to tears, when he's like, when Bashir says it's going to be hard work to spread this vaccine around to everyone, and he's like, and he says, no, it's not going to be work, it's going to be a privilege. And then he holds up this baby for everyone to see, and it's amazing. And then the episode ends with Bashir like hard at work, still trying to find a cure, because he only found the vaccine, and Cisco tries to, make him feel better and be like, look, you gave these people a vaccine, their babies won't be born with the disease. You did that. And he is like, yeah, but people still die of this disease. I didn't cure it. And so you see him trying to cure it, and he doesn't. It's a failure. It's like the good guys kind of sort of win, but not really. And that's a kind of complex storytelling that makes Deep Space Nine so fucking good. And this in particular is, I think, one of the best episodes. This probably make my top 10 of all of Star Trek. And yet people say it's just okay. Get out of here with that. This is a masterpiece. Anyway, so that is it for my top 10 most underrated episodes of the Star Trek franchise. Thank you so much for watching. As I said, if you haven't seen my overrated episodes, you can check out that top 10. Also check out my channel for many more videos on many more Star Trek materials and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.